Hello everybody, it's VG Time back again with another deck profile. This one's going to be a little different because it's going to be a tournament report as well as an update to my King Cole deck. I went to the Connecticut Regional, had a good time, was successful by my standards. Even though I did not top 8, I did well at the tournament. So I'll go over the deck real quick, the matches I had, and I'm going to also include my side deck so you have a good idea what needs to be done in order for you to show up at one of these best of 3 tournaments. All right, so let's get into it. Of course, we have the leader and the leader field spell. That kind of goes without saying. The rest of the field lineup goes like this: 4 new ruler, 4 anticipated, 3 unstoppable, and 2 terrify realization. This lineup right here is, to me, optimal. I have not had games where after Mulligan I didn't have a field, and because of the way these kind of work out, you almost always awaken on turn 2. Next up, we have 4 copies of the Unison. It's kind of standard, and of course that comes with 4 copies of Charismatic and 2 copies of Zamasu, which again, I don't see a lot of people playing this. And it kind of just makes sense to run it, and it has worked out well for me. I was able to pressure a lot of people, strip a lot of cards out of hand, so just great card. 4 copies of Berry Blue and 2 copies of Paragus. This I got from Butters, so shout out to him. And then 2 copies of Frieza Revived and Reviled. I was asked about this card during the original deck profile. I really hate this card. Just really hate the card overall. But I learned a way to use it that I don't hate it as much anymore. The way that has been is that once I get out Terrified, I usually use a Paragus to sack off Anticipated. And especially if I have a second one in hand. And then I use the Unison to play Anticipated to play this as a 25k dual attacker, in which case it becomes almost like the Bardock that people are using, the 6-drop one with the dual attack of 25k to end the game. This is also a free dual attack 25k. So if you use it in a more aggressive manner, it's actually not that bad of a card. 2 copies of Golden Frieza. 2 copies of the Sun Gohan Hidden Might. Big Ape. So, for this part right here, you see that it doesn't really change much besides these 4 cards from the original deck profile. You'll see up in the corner a link to that one where I explain what all the cards do. But one of the big changes I made was I took out the 4-drop cooler. The 4-drop cooler, as cool as the card as it is, has underperformed quite a bit. And I have another card that I have in here to replace it, which I'll talk about in a second. Now, I expected more King Cole to show up since it was top in multiple tournaments. Also was expecting to see like some baby decks. And I wanted to have an advantage over those decks as far as card advantage. So if you saw my stream, I went with 2 copies of Dr. Mew Weapon Surplus. He allows you to mill 3 as a burst when you play him to get back any of your green extra cards that cost 2 or less. So that includes all your negates and everything. He could also pick up an android with cost 3 or more. And that's why I run this guy right here, Super 17 Power Distilled. This card is a house. And is one of the reasons why I lost the game, because he's so good. Like, he's so good that your opponent just wants to use heroines on him and completely wreck your entire life. But what he does is when he swings, he warps a card in your drop to get a green extra card back from your drop to your hand, and your opponent warps a card from their hand. He's dual attack, so he does it twice. He costs 4 as long as you have 10 or more non-black cards in your drop. Again, with New Ruler and various other things, it's pretty easy to do. And then you just drop this, usually like on turn 5 in the grindier games. You play this, you get back 2 of your negates, or however you want to do it, and you'll be able to continue the assault while stripping cards from your opponent. 4 copies of Paragus, kind of go without saying. Then a negate package is 2 copies of King Code, 4 Royal, and 2 copies of, let me see if I can switch this over a little bit. 2 copies of Homicidal Clones. This had worked out quite well, quite good as well. Having like besides him, like this guy right here, I might replace with Dormants, only because he's cool, but there was never really a matchup where I jammed him on the table, and my opponent was like, "Oh my God, I don't want to attack you and discard 1 card," especially if they felt they could kill you. Again, everybody has a lot of cards in hand, so usually you're ahead. You're stripping incremental cards, but it's not enough to make it so that discarding 1 card matters. And then 2 copies of Focus Breakthrough. This is my replacement for the Green Cooler. So the reason why the Green Cooler needed to be replaced is because his cost reduction is only on your opponent's turn. Being only on the opponent's turn limits what he is able to hit. So this right here is live as early as turn 2 because it requires you to be 4 or less life. Again, with this lineup, you get there. And then you use this to stop their 3 or less, which usually includes most of their negate plays and stuff like that. So this is the main deck. Pause it here if you want to get the image of it. And after that, I'm going to go into my side deck. So let's just scoop this up. So my side, I used a lot of it. Not as much as I thought I would, but I did use a lot of it. Only having 5 rounds was kind of a tough thing. I was hoping for a 6th round. I believe with a 6th round, I could have ended 4-2 and possibly, topped a little higher. I did make it into top 16, but top 16 doesn't really matter. You had to make it to top 8. There was 54 players at this event, so it was a pretty good size event. All right, so side deck. 2 copies of Mechi. That's primarily for Dark Broly. 2 copies of Dark Power. Didn't use it the entire time. I was hoping to be going against more aggro decks where I put this down and it just completely wrecks them. Like if you play this out first, your King Vegeta player has to use their field effect to get it off the table, which means they're burning their energy before they can play a baby on your turn. Let's see. 8-drop Fu and 10-drop Fu. I bought these in a bunch of times, never used them. When I thought the game would go long, I'd bring in 10-drop Fu if I was going first. But usually I ended up killing them before that came up. And 8-drop Fu is if I felt the game was going long, but I was going second, and it was also for Dark Broly. And I'll talk about that in a minute because that was wild. This right here, I actually bought this in the mirror. It was initially meant for King Piccolo, along with Dark Power, but I didn't run into King Piccolo at all. 2 copies of Chilled. I should have probably bought this in more, just to be more aggressive against certain decks, but I didn't, so that is what it is. Bigamore, again for Dark Broly, but I also bought it in against Aggro Shen, and it worked out pretty well for me. Blue Impulse, again meant for the low to the ground aggro decks, the rival decks that like to play cards on your turn. Never bought it in. And Heart Arrow Love, again, meant for the more aggressive decks, which is all over the place in this format. Did not play one of them. So never got to use any of this great anti-aggro side deck. But I do think the side deck was well balanced. And some better decisions could have been made on my part to turn certain games around. All right, tournament report. Round one, I went against the launch player that came in the top 8. Good player in my area. Know him. I played against him several times. And we have, back and forth in the past, at least, on how the wins worked out. He was playing Tricolor Launch, and what ended up happening there was that he hit Heroines twice. So, not that I ever comboed in on a card heavy. It's just that having that Heroines tipped the scales for the amount of attackers he would have that I could keep track of. What's really crazy about it was that he had Heroines the Super 17, and then followed it up with a a Dark Banisher 8-drop. And that made it so I could not possibly mathematically defend myself, as he came in with 325Ks and 219K attacks that also will rip cards out of my hand. So I lost that matchup. It is what it is. Very next round, I played against a subscriber on the channel. I believe his name was Patrick. And we both played King Code. It was an enjoyable game for me. We went to 3 games, and I ended up pulling that one out. Game 3 was the only game I did not enjoy of the day, and that was against Dark Broly. Dark Broly was just... So I don't want to declare a deck unwinnable, right? But they just do so many things per turn that even with your disruption doesn't really matter. None of your disruption really matter. So I'll give you an example, right? So let's go back to the table. So he had nothing on the table at the time except for the 7-drop Dark Broly that's red. And I was like, okay, well, I got some good cards in my hand. I'm going to draw a bunch of more cards. Then I play Mechagabura and name Dark Broly cost a 6. Especially since he can't make another 7. And he was already awoken, so I didn't have to worry about a heartfelt plea play. So, actually, no, he wasn't going to be able to awaken. Like, he was at 6 life. And so I wasn't worried about a heartfelt plea play. So I played this and named the Dark Broly cost 6 so he couldn't just spam the field with 30Ks. And what he did was one of the grossest plays I've ever seen. He said, oh, okay, no problem. I will pay 2, Dark Overwhelm, the Secretary SCR, get 2 of these other 30Ks, and then try to push you in. So he had the 7-drop 30K, he had the Demagra SR ripping a card out of my hand, he had the Goku drawing him a card, and he had the 40K double striker on the ultimate. So even though I stopped all his Dark Brolys, he still was able to make a full board and come at me. Now, of course, you can't play a second one of these. So you were hoping to hit Bigamore. I did not hit Bigamore. It didn't show up for me. So I stockpiled, my negates. I had everything ready. And that was when he was able to do heartfelt plea shenanigans and various other things. And again, I was killing off and keeping things at bay. And then eventually he was just like, okay, well, here's 3 to 4 more guys. And then after I dealt with that, he was like, okay, I'm just going to swing and then throw my entire hand on it and with a Champa, there's no way you're going to be able to deal with that. And I was like, you're right. So I took that L there. And I played both games completely different. Like in the first game, I tried to be more aggressive and try to push them down with a kill. But once they get to the backside, it becomes very hard to kill them without some way to impede that ability. So I wasn't able to do that. In the second game, I tried to play a little slower, try to drag the game out more. But the more energy they have and the more cards they get, just the better their deck is. So still a very powerful deck. They do work. Round 4, I played against Cell Surge. That was a quick 2-0. Round 5, I played against a cool player that I know, the community knows. He was playing aggro Sin Shenron, and I was able to control his board state enough so that, it was never really a big deal. And then I 2-0'd that one. So I ended up with a record of 3-2. Only game I kind of wish I had back was the launch game. And the main reason why that mattered, and this is something for people who want to play tournaments, especially the larger ones. If you prepare for a certain set of decks in the meta that you know are popular, you got to get that first win. Because then that guarantees that you go against those decks throughout the rest of the tournament. If you take your first loss, then you're kind of going into the loss bracket where you could run into whatever. And once you get your second loss, you're playing against rogue tier decks the entire way through, which is fine. I have no issue with that. But I was very prepared for Mecha Frieza, which was probably about 25% in the room, and I didn't see one of those matches. I was also prepared for King Piccolo and King Vegeta. They were also well represented. Didn't play against any of those. Yeah, so that's basically what it comes down to. Would I take changes with the deck? I already kind of discussed it. I might actually take out the King Code for Dormants, or I might adjust other cards for Dormants. I just want I want 2 copies main, or at least put 2 on the side for a matchup like Dark Broly that could just make so many attacks in the turn. So that's about it. Otherwise, I was very happy with the deck. Happy with my performance because I evolved a lot throughout the tournament and how I played the deck, and I think that just made me overall a better player of the strategy. So that's about it. See you guys on Wednesday where I will be live streaming. And this is VG Time signing out.